Captain Sarah Chen stared at the holographic display in her quarters aboard the UES Horizon, trying to make sense of what she was reading. The message had arrived 3 hours ago through official diplomatic channels, encrypted with codes that took their best cryptographers 40 minutes to crack. Even now, the words seemed impossible. The Vextai Dominion was requesting human protection services. Sarah had been fighting the Vextai for the better part of a decade. Every human in the galaxy knew their reputation. Standing 12 feet tall with chitinous black exoskeletons, razor-sharp claws that could slice through titanium, and acid that could melt through ship hulls, they were the apex predators of known space. Their warrior culture had conquered 47 star systems, and their battle fleets had never known defeat. Until humanity showed up. The first contact between humans and the Vextai had been a disaster. A human exploration vessel, the Meridian, had accidentally crossed into Vextai territory while mapping a nebula. The Vextai response had been swift and brutal. They destroyed the ship, killing all 200 crew members, and sent a message to Earth: surrender or be exterminated. Earth's response had been equally direct: come and take it. What followed was a war that shocked the galaxy. The other species, the diplomatic Zalari, the merchant Korthax, the isolationist Etherians, all expected humanity to be wiped out within months. The Vextai had superior technology, larger ships, and centuries of military experience. But humans had something the galaxy had never encountered before: absolute refusal to surrender. Sarah remembered her first battle against a Vextai dreadnought. Her destroyer, the Defiance, had been outgunned 3-1. Standard military doctrine would have called for retreat. Instead, Sarah had ordered her ship to ram the enemy vessel at full speed while launching every torpedo they had. The resulting explosion had taken out both ships, but 30 human escape pods had survived. The Vextai dreadnought had been completely destroyed. That battle had set the tone for the entire war. Humans didn't fight like any species the Vextai had encountered. They didn't retreat when outnumbered. They didn't surrender when captured. They didn't negotiate when cornered. Instead, they did things that defied all military logic: ramming ships into enemy vessels, detonating their own ammunition stores to take out boarding parties, fighting to the last person with whatever weapons they could find. The Vextai called it madness. Human military command called it Tuesday. The war had raged for 8 years across 17 star systems. Billions had died on both sides. Entire planets had been reduced to radioactive wastelands. The Vextai had superior numbers and technology, but humans had something more valuable. They were absolutely terrifying when cornered. The turning point had come at the Battle of Zerion Prime. The Vextai had surrounded the human colony with their entire battle fleet, 300 ships against the humans' 47. The colony's planetary defense grid had been destroyed, and orbital bombardment had begun. Standard protocols demanded immediate evacuation. Instead, the human colonists had done something unprecedented. They had triggered their planet's mining charges, turning the entire world into a massive explosive device. The resulting detonation had destroyed the Vextai fleet and created a new asteroid belt where Zerion Prime had once orbited its star. The message was clear: humans would rather destroy everything than submit. After Zerion Prime, the Vextai had requested a ceasefire. Not surrender, their warrior pride wouldn't allow that, but a temporary halt to hostilities while they reconsidered their tactical approach. The ceasefire had held for 6 months now, though both sides maintained their military readiness, which made the current message even more confusing. Sarah read the diplomatic note again, searching for hidden meanings or mistranslations. The language was formal, following standard galactic diplomatic protocols, but the request was bizarre. The Vextai wanted to hire human mercenaries as bodyguards, not for their warriors or political leaders, for their children. The door chimed, and Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb entered. He was Sarah's tactical officer and the only person aboard who had survived more battles against the Vextai than she had. His left arm was cybernetic, a souvenir from a Vextai boarding action that had left him the sole survivor of his previous ship. "Captain, Admiral Harrison is requesting a priority conference call in 10 minutes, Marcus reported. Apparently, every human fleet commander in the sector received the same message. Sarah nodded, still staring at the holographic display. "Marcus, in your professional opinion, what would make the most dangerous species in the galaxy ask their enemies to protect their young?" Marcus considered the question seriously. He had a habit of thinking through problems methodically, which had kept him alive through 15 major engagements. Either they're facing something even more dangerous than us, or they've learned something about humans that we don't know about ourselves. That's what I was thinking. Sarah closed the display and stood up. "Let's go find out which one it is." The conference call connected representatives from 12 human fleets scattered across the frontier. Admiral Harrison appeared first, his weathered face showing the strain of commanding humanity's war effort. Behind him, Sarah could see the bridge of the UES Retribution, humanity's largest dreadnought. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harrison began without preamble, "I'll be direct. 3 hours ago, every human fleet commander received an identical message from the Vextai High Command. They're offering us a contract." Captain Rodriguez of the 4th Fleet leaned forward. "Admiral, with respect, the Vextai don't negotiate. They conquer or they're conquered. This has to be some kind of trap." "That was my first thought as well," Harrison replied. "However, our intelligence network has confirmed some disturbing reports from the Galactic Council. Apparently, the Vextai have been dealing with an internal crisis for the past year." The display changed to show star charts of Vextai territory. Red markers indicated areas of recent activity, and Sarah noticed they were all clustered around the Dominion's core worlds. "Something has been killing Vexithai children," Harrison continued. "Not in battle. These deaths are occurring on their most heavily defended planets, inside their most secure facilities. Whatever's responsible can penetrate their best defenses and kill their young without leaving any trace of how it was done." Captain Thompson of the 8th Fleet frowned. "How many casualties are we talking about?" "In the past year, nearly 30% of their next generation." The number hung in the air like a death sentence. "At this rate, the Vextai will face extinction within 2 generations." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The Vextai reproduced slowly, taking decades to mature. Losing 30% of their young wasn't just a tragedy. It was a species-ending catastrophe. "Do we know what's causing these deaths?" asked Captain Liu of the 10th Fleet. Harrison shook his head. "The Vextai aren't sharing details, but our sources suggest the children are being found dead with no signs of violence, no toxins in their systems, and no evidence of how the killer entered or left the scene. It's as if something is literally scaring them to death." "And they want us to stop it," Sarah said, understanding dawning. "More than that," Harrison replied. "They want us to protect their remaining children. According to the contract terms, they're offering to place their young under human protection in specially constructed facilities. They're willing to pay us with advanced technology, territorial concessions, and military equipment." The implications were staggering. The Vextai were offering to give their most precious possessions, their children, to the species they'd been trying to exterminate. It was like wolves asking sheep to babysit their cubs. "Admiral," Captain Martinez of the 6th Fleet spoke up, "this could be the opportunity we've been waiting for. If we control their children, we effectively control them." "That's one way to look at it," Harrison agreed. "But there's something else to consider. Intelligence reports suggest that other species have tried to help the Vextai with this problem. The Zalari sent their best medical teams. The Korthax provided advanced security systems. The Etherians offered their psychic specialists." Sarah waited for the other shoe to drop. All of them failed, Harrison continued. Not only did the deaths continue, but the alien specialists started dying too. Whatever's killing the Vextai children began targeting anyone who tried to protect them. The conference call fell silent as the commanders absorbed this information. They were being asked to face an enemy that had defeated the galaxy's most advanced species, something that could kill without leaving evidence and could apparently target anyone who opposed it. "Why us?" Captain Rodriguez finally asked. "Why do the Vextai think humans can succeed where everyone else failed?" Harrison's expression was grim. According to their message, it's because humans are the only species they've encountered that doesn't show fear in the face of certain death. They believe that whatever's killing their children feeds on fear, and that our apparent inability to experience proper terror makes us immune to its effects. Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. They think we're too stupid to be scared. Or too crazy, Marcus added quietly. The question now, Harrison continued, is whether we accept their contract. I'm polling all fleet commanders for their recommendations. The final decision will be made by Earth Command, but your input will be crucial. Sarah considered the options. Accepting the contract meant potentially facing an unknown enemy that had already proven capable of defeating the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. Refusing meant passing up the opportunity to end the war with the Vextai on favorable terms. More importantly, it meant abandoning children to death. "Admiral," Sarah said, "I have a question. Do we know how the Vextai children are being selected? Is there a pattern to which ones are being targeted?" Harrison consulted his notes. "According to our intelligence, the deaths appear random. Children of all ages from different family lines in different locations. The only common factor is that they're all considered exceptional by Vextai standards, the smartest, strongest, or most promising of their generation." That detail changed everything. Whatever was killing the Vextai children wasn't just eliminating random targets. It was systematically destroying their future leaders, their best and brightest. This wasn't just murder, it was genocide through selective breeding. "I vote yes," Sarah said firmly. "We accept the contract." The other commanders turned to look at her in surprise. "Captain Chen," Captain Rodriguez said carefully, "this could be a suicide mission. We'd be facing something that's already killed thousands of children and defeated every attempt to stop it." Sarah nodded. "You're absolutely right. It probably is a suicide mission." She paused, thinking of Zerion Prime, of the Defiance, of all the battles where humans had chosen to fight impossible odds rather than surrender. But that's what we do, isn't it? We take the missions everyone else is too sensible to accept. One by one, the other commanders voiced their agreement. Captain Thompson was the last to decide, taking a long moment to consider before nodding slowly. "It's settled then," Admiral Harrison said. "I'll forward our recommendation to Earth Command. If they approve, we'll be assembling a joint task force within the week." As the conference call ended and the holographic displays faded, Sarah found herself alone with Marcus in her quarters again. He was quiet for several minutes, staring out the viewport at the stars. "Captain," he finally said, "there's something about this situation that bothers me." "Just one thing?" Sarah asked with dark humor. "The Vextai are warriors. They've conquered most of the known galaxy through superior firepower and tactical brilliance, but they're asking us, a species they consider primitive, to protect their most valuable assets." Sarah nodded. "What's your point?" "My point is that the Vextai don't make decisions based on desperation. They make them based on calculated assessment of capabilities." Marcus turned from the viewport to face her. "They're not hiring us because they're desperate. They're hiring us because they've identified something specific about humans that makes us uniquely qualified for this job." The thought sent another chill down Sarah's spine. "What do you think they've figured out about us?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. I think they've realized that humans aren't just unafraid of death. We're unafraid of things that are worse than death. Before Sarah could respond, the ship's communication system chimed with an incoming priority message. The sender's identification made her blood run cold. HFY High Command, marked for immediate and personal delivery to Captain Sarah Chen. She opened the message with trembling fingers. The text was brief, written in perfect English. Captain Chen, your species' reputation for protecting the innocent is known even among your enemies. Our children are dying and we cannot save them. We ask not as conquerors but as parents. Will you help us? The message was signed with a name Sarah recognized. War Master Kethvar, the HFY commander who had personally ordered the destruction of the Meridian 8 years ago. The same alien who had sworn to exterminate every human in the galaxy. He was asking her to save his children. 2 weeks later, Sarah stood on the bridge of the UES Prometheus, humanity's newest experimental vessel, watching as the HFY homeworld of Kethmaran grew larger in the main viewport. The planet was a fortress world, surrounded by defensive platforms and patrol fleets that could have reduced any human fleet to scrap metal in minutes. Today, those same defenses were escorting her ship to the surface. The irony wasn't lost on her. 3 months ago, approaching this close to Kethmaran would have been considered an act of war. Now she was being welcomed as a potential savior. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. Captain, Lieutenant Chen reported from the communications station, we're receiving landing coordinates from Kethmaran Control. They're directing us to the capital city's ceremonial spaceport. Sarah nodded. The ceremonial spaceport was where the HFY welcomed honored guests and dignitaries. She tried not to think about the fact that the last humans to land there had been prisoners of war who were never seen again. The Prometheus settled onto the landing pad with barely a tremor, her advanced stabilizers compensating for the planet's higher gravity. Through the viewport, Sarah could see a delegation of HFY waiting on the tarmac. Even at this distance, their imposing forms were unmistakable, towering figures in elaborate armor, standing motionless as statues. Atmospheric readings are within human tolerance, reported Lieutenant Kim from the science station. The HFY have installed human-compatible air recycling systems in the meeting areas. Sarah turned to address her team. She had brought 12 of her best people for this mission, specialists in security, xenobiology, psychology, and combat. Each one had volunteered knowing they might never return home. Remember, we're not here as conquerors or prisoners, she told them. We're here as consultants. The HFY are trusting us with their children's lives, which means they're trusting us with their entire future. Whatever personal feelings we have about this species, we put them aside. Our job is to solve a problem, not settle old scores. Sergeant First Class Maria Vasquez, the team's head of security, raised her hand. Captain, what are our rules of engagement if this turns out to be a trap? It was a fair question. Everyone on the team had lost friends or family to HFY attacks over the past 8 years. The temptation for revenge would be strong if things went badly. If this is a trap, we follow standard evacuation protocols, Sarah replied. But I don't think it is. Everything we've learned about the HFY suggests they value their children above everything else, including their hatred of humans. They wouldn't risk their young for the sake of capturing a few humans. Dr. Elizabeth Warren, the team's xenopsychologist, looked up from her portable computer. Captain, I've been reviewing the psychological profiles of the HFY children who have died. There's a pattern that the previous investigation teams might have missed. What kind of pattern? All of the victims were what the HFY consider empathic, children who showed unusual sensitivity to the emotions and mental states of others. In human terms, we might call them highly intuitive or emotionally intelligent. Sarah frowned. That seems like an odd target selection for a random killer. That's just it, Dr. Warren continued. I don't think this is a random killer. I think we're dealing with something that specifically targets empathic individuals, possibly because they're more vulnerable to some form of psychic or emotional attack. Before Sarah could respond, the airlock chimed, indicating that the Vextai delegation had arrived. She straightened her uniform and nodded to her team. "Showtime, people! Let's go save some children." The airlock opened to reveal 3 Vextai officials. Sarah had seen Vextai before, of course, but never this close without someone shooting. They were even more intimidating in person, 12 feet tall with exoskeletons that looked like they could deflect artillery rounds. Their faces were alien, with compound eyes and mandibles that clicked when they spoke, but Sarah thought she could detect something almost human in their posture. Exhaustion. The lead Vextai stepped forward and spoke in heavily accented English. "I am High Counselor Thekvar, representative of the ruling caste. You are Captain Chen?" "I am," Sarah replied, resisting the urge to salute. The Vextai had their own formal greetings, and she had studied them during the flight. She placed her right hand over her heart and inclined her head slightly, a gesture of respect between equals. Thekvar's mandibles clicked in what Sarah hoped was approval. "We are grateful for your presence, Captain Chen. Your reputation as a protector of the innocent precedes you." That was an interesting way to describe someone who had spent 8 years trying to kill Vextai, but Sarah decided not to comment. "High Counselor, my team is here to assess the situation and develop protective measures for your children. We'll need complete access to the investigation files and the affected areas." "You shall have everything you require," Thekvar replied. "But first, there is someone who wishes to speak with you." He gestured toward a second Vextai, one whose armor bore the distinctive markings of a military commander. Sarah recognized him immediately from intelligence briefings. War Master Kethvar, the alien who had sent her the personal message. Kethvar stepped forward, and Sarah was surprised to see that he was younger than she had expected. Vexathai aged slowly, but something in his posture suggested the weight of recent trauma. "Captain Chen," he said, his voice carefully controlled, "I am the one who requested your personal involvement in this matter." "War Master," Sarah replied formally. "I received your message. I understand you've lost children to this threat." For a moment, Kethvar's composure cracked, and Sarah saw something she had never expected to see in a Vextai warrior: vulnerability. "My daughter, Kesara, was among the first to die," he said quietly. "She was gifted with great empathy, able to sense the emotions of others, even across great distances. She was to be trained as a diplomatic negotiator, a bridge between our people and others." Sarah felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. Despite everything the Vextai had done, despite all the humans who had died in this war, she could understand a parent's grief. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said, and meant it. Kethvar nodded acknowledgement. "Your species has a saying, 'The enemy of my enemy is my friend.' Whatever killed my daughter is now killing others. It has become our common enemy." High Counselor Thekvar gestured toward a waiting transport vehicle. "Captain, we have prepared quarters for your team in the capital city. However, I believe you will want to begin your investigation immediately." "Where are the surviving children being kept?" Sarah asked. "In the most secure facility on our homeworld," Thekvar replied. "The sanctuary of future generations. It is where we house and educate our most promising young. It has not been breached in over 3 centuries. Sarah exchanged glances with her team. If something could penetrate a facility that had stood secure for 300 years, they were dealing with a threat beyond normal parameters. The transport ride to the sanctuary took them through the heart of the Vextai capital. Sarah had expected a city built for war, all harsh angles and military fortifications. Instead, she found herself looking at something surprisingly beautiful. The Vexthai architecture emphasized flowing curves and organic shapes, with buildings that seemed to grow from the ground like crystalline trees. "It's not what you expected," Kethvar observed, noticing her expression. "No," Sarah admitted. "I expected something more militaristic." "We are warriors by necessity, not by nature," Kethvar explained. "Before we encountered other species, our cities were places of art and learning. The military structures came later, when we learned that the galaxy was not as peaceful as we had hoped." Dr. Warren leaned forward from her seat. "War Master, if I may ask, when did your people first encounter other sapient species?" "Approximately 400 standard years ago," Kethvar replied. "We were explorers then, sending out ships to map the stars and search for others like ourselves." "What changed?" Dr. Warren asked. Kethvar was quiet for a long moment. "We found others, and they tried to exterminate us." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. The Vexthai weren't naturally aggressive conquerors. They were survivors who had learned that in a hostile galaxy, the choice was often to kill or be killed. "The first species we encountered were the hegemony of worlds," Kethvar continued. "They viewed us as a threat to their expansion plans and launched a preemptive strike against our colonies. We lost 17 worlds before we learned to fight back." Sarah's mental image of the Vexthai began to shift. She had always assumed they were predators, apex killers who conquered because they enjoyed domination. The reality was more complex. They were prey who had learned to become predators in order to survive. The transport stopped in front of a massive complex that seemed to be carved from a single piece of black stone. The sanctuary of future generations was both beautiful and forbidding, with spires that reached toward the sky and walls that looked thick enough to stop a battleship's main guns. "Impressive defenses," Sergeant Vasquez observed. "The walls are reinforced with quantum-locked metal alloys," Tekvar explained. "The energy barriers can withstand direct hits from fleet-class weapons. The detection systems can identify threats at the molecular level. No unauthorized being has ever penetrated the sanctuary's defenses." "Until now," Sarah said grimly. As they approached the main entrance, Sarah noticed something that made her skin crawl. Despite the impressive defenses and the obvious care that had gone into the sanctuary's construction, there was something wrong with the atmosphere. The air itself seemed heavy, oppressive, as if the building was holding its breath in fear. Her team felt it too. She could see the tension in their faces, the way they instinctively checked their weapons and scanned for threats that logic told them couldn't be present. "Captain," Dr. Warren said quietly, "I'm reading elevated stress hormones from everyone on the team. Whatever's affecting this place, it's having a psychological impact on humans as well as Vexthai." Sarah nodded. "Stay alert, everyone. We're dealing with something that can affect minds, not just bodies." The interior of the sanctuary was even more impressive than the exterior. The main hall was a vast space filled with natural light from crystal skylights, with corridors branching off in all directions. The walls were decorated with artwork created by Vexthai children. Paintings, sculptures, and holographic displays that showed imagination and creativity Sarah had never expected from a supposedly militaristic species. But despite the beauty of the surroundings, the feeling of wrongness persisted. It was as if something dark and hungry was lurking just beyond perception, waiting for the right moment to strike. "The children are housed in the residential wings," Tekvar explained, leading them down a corridor lined with more student artwork. "Each age group has its own section, with common areas for learning and recreation." They passed several classrooms where young Vexthai were engaged in various lessons. Sarah was struck by how normal it all seemed, children being children, regardless of species. They were curious about the human visitors, clustering near the doorways to get a better look. One young Vextai, no more than a child by human standards, approached Sarah directly. It spoke in rapid Vextai, its voice high and excited. "What did she say?" Sarah asked Kethvar. Kethvar's mandibles clicked in what Sarah was learning to recognize as amusement. "She said you're much smaller than she expected humans to be, and she wants to know if it's true that your species can survive in vacuum for short periods." Sarah couldn't help but smile. "Tell her that we can't actually survive in vacuum, but we're very good at holding our breath when we need to." As Kethavar translated, the young Vexthai's eyes widened with apparent delight. She chattered something else, then scampered back to her classmates to share what she had learned. "Her name is Yeska," Kethvar said softly. "She is one of the ones we are most concerned about protecting. Her empathic abilities are exceptionally strong, even for our kind." Sarah watched the young Vextai interacting with her peers and felt a fierce protective instinct surge through her. Whatever was killing these children, it wouldn't get past her team. She would make sure of that. "Hi, Counselor," she said, turning back to Tekvar. "I need to see the sites where the previous deaths occurred. And I need to speak with any children who might have witnessed or sensed anything unusual." "That may be difficult," Tekvar replied. "The surviving children are understandably traumatized. Many of them refuse to speak about what they may have experienced." Dr. Warren stepped forward. "With your permission, I'd like to try a different approach. Instead of asking them to talk about what happened, I could work with them on art therapy projects. Children often express trauma through creative activities when they can't verbalize it." Tekvar considered this suggestion. "You believe their artwork might reveal clues about the nature of the threat?" "It's possible," Dr. Warren said. "If whatever's killing the children operates on a psychic or emotional level, the surviving children might have sensed its presence even if they don't consciously remember the encounter." As they continued the tour, Sarah's team began setting up their equipment and conducting preliminary investigations. Sergeant Vasquez established security checkpoints and began analyzing the sanctuary's defensive systems. Dr. Warren started her sessions with the children. The technical specialists began scanning for energy anomalies and checking the environmental systems. But as the hours passed, Sarah found herself becoming increasingly uneasy. It wasn't just the oppressive atmosphere of the place, though that continued to affect everyone on the team. It was the growing sense that they were being watched by something that didn't want them there. That evening, as Sarah reviewed the investigation reports in her temporary quarters, a soft chime indicated someone was requesting entry. She opened the door to find War Master Kethvar standing in the corridor. "Captain, may I speak with you privately?" he asked. Sarah gestured him into her quarters. The Vextai commander was too large for the furniture designed for humans, so he remained standing while Sarah took a seat at her desk. "There is something I did not mention during the formal briefing," Kethvar began. "Something that may be relevant to your investigation." Sarah leaned forward, giving him her full attention. "The deaths began shortly after we discovered something during an archaeological expedition," Kethvar continued. "Our scientists found the ruins of an ancient civilization on a dead world at the edge of our territory. The ruins were old, perhaps millions of years old, and contained artifacts that we could not identify." "What kind of artifacts?" "Crystalline structures that appeared to store information or energy. Our researchers brought several of them back to our homeworld for study." Kethvar paused, his mandibles clicking nervously. "The first child died 3 days later." Sarah felt ice form in her stomach. "Are you saying the artifacts are connected to the deaths?" "I do not know," Kethvar admitted. "But the timing suggests a correlation. And there is something else. The artifacts have been changing, growing. They appear to be absorbing energy from their surroundings and using it to replicate themselves." "Where are these artifacts now?" In a secure research facility beneath the sanctuary, Kethvar replied. We moved them there when we realized the connection to the children's deaths. We thought the sanctuary's defenses would contain whatever effect they were having. Sarah stood up abruptly. Kethvar, you buried unknown alien artifacts beneath a facility housing your children? We had no choice, Kethvar said defensively. The artifacts were too dangerous to leave unguarded, and the sanctuary was the most secure location on our homeworld. Sarah activated her comm unit. All teams, this is Captain Chen. Priority Alpha. I need everyone in the main hall immediately. We have a situation. As her team assembled, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they had just discovered the source of the threat. But she also had the disturbing sensation that it had wanted to be discovered, that everything that had happened so far had been part of some larger plan. Whatever was in those ancient artifacts, it had been waiting millions of years for the right moment to act. And somehow, the arrival of the humans had triggered the next phase of its plan. The research facility beneath the sanctuary was a maze of sterile corridors and reinforced chambers, designed to contain the most dangerous materials known to Vex-Thai science. As Sarah's team descended deeper into the complex, the oppressive feeling that had been haunting the sanctuary above grew stronger with each level. Energy readings are off the charts, reported Lieutenant Kim, monitoring her portable scanners. I'm detecting quantum fluctuations consistent with dimensional instability. Dr. Warren was pale, her hands trembling slightly as she checked her psychological monitoring equipment. Captain, the psychic pressure down here is almost unbearable. Whatever these artifacts are, they're broadcasting some kind of emotional field. Sarah nodded grimly. Her own mental state was becoming increasingly unstable the deeper they went. Images flashed through her mind. Visions of vast empty spaces, of hunger that spanned millennia, of intelligence cold and alien beyond human comprehension. War Master Kethvar led them to a reinforced vault door marked with warning symbols in multiple languages. The artifacts are contained beyond this barrier, he explained. Only senior researchers have been permitted access since the children began dying. How many researchers have studied these artifacts? Sarah asked. 12 initially, Kethvar replied. Now only 4 remain alive. The vault door opened with a series of mechanical clicks and energy discharges. Beyond was a chamber that defied easy description. The walls seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, and the air itself shimmered with barely visible energy patterns. In the center of the room, arranged on a series of pedestals, were 7 crystalline structures that hurt to look at directly. The artifacts were beautiful and terrible at the same time. They appeared to be made of some kind of living crystal that pulsed with internal light, changing colors in patterns that seemed almost like breathing. Each one was roughly the size of a human torso, with complex geometric structures that seemed to fold in on themselves in ways that violated normal spatial relationships. Jesus, whispered Sergeant Vasquez. Those things are definitely not natural. Dr. Warren approached one of the artifacts cautiously, her scanner in hand. Captain, I'm reading massive psychic emanations from these objects. They're not just storing energy, they're thinking. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. You're saying they're alive? More than alive, Dr. Warren replied, her voice tight with fear. They're intelligent, and they're communicating with each other. As if responding to her words, the artifacts suddenly flared brighter. The pulsing pattern of their internal light synchronized, and Sarah felt something brush against the edges of her consciousness, a presence vast and alien and hungry. Images flooded her mind, visions of the ancient civilization that had created these artifacts, a species that had tried to transcend physical existence by transferring their consciousness into crystalline matrices. She saw their final moments as something went wrong with the process, trapping them in a state between life and death, between matter and energy. For millions of years they had waited in their crystal prisons, driven mad by isolation and sensory deprivation. They had become something new, a collective intelligence that fed on the life force of other beings, growing stronger with each death they caused. "They're predators," Sarah gasped, breaking free from the mental contact. "But not just predators, they're farmers. They've been cultivating the Vexthai, waiting for them to develop empathic children who would be more nutritious to consume." Kethvar stepped back from the artifacts, his exoskeleton clattering with fear. "You're saying these things have been manipulating our evolution?" "Not just manipulating," Dr. Warren said, studying her readings. "They've been guiding it, encouraging the development of empathic abilities in your children so they could harvest them when the time was right." Lieutenant Kim looked up from her scanners. "Captain, the energy output from these artifacts is increasing exponentially. Whatever they're doing, it's building toward something." Sarah activated her comm unit. "All teams, evacuate the research facility immediately. Move the children to the surface and prepare for emergency transport off-world." Before anyone could respond, the artifacts flared with blinding light, the chamber filled with an otherworldly scream, not a sound, but a psychic cry that bypassed the ears and struck directly at the mind. Sarah's team staggered, clutching their heads in agony. Through the pain, Sarah saw the crystalline structures beginning to crack and split. Something was emerging from within them, wisps of energy that coalesced into vaguely humanoid forms. The ancient consciousness trapped in the crystals was finally breaking free. "Run!" Sarah shouted, grabbing Dr. Warren and hauling her toward the exit. "Everyone out now!" They fled through the corridors as the facility's emergency alarms began blaring. Behind them, Sarah could hear the sound of metal, tearing, and energy discharges as something vast and angry tore its way through the research complex. They reached the surface to find chaos. The sanctuary's defensive systems were activating automatically, energy barriers snapping into place around the building. But Sarah knew the defenses wouldn't hold. Whatever was coming up from below had been planning this moment for millions of years. "Kethvar!" she called to the Vexthai commander. "How many children are still in the building?" 237, he replied, his voice tight with controlled panic. "We're evacuating them now, but the transport ships won't be ready for another 20 minutes. Sarah looked at her team. They were exhausted, frightened, and facing an enemy they barely understood, but she could see the determination in their eyes, the same stubborn refusal to surrender that had characterized humanity's response to every crisis they had ever faced. "All right, people," she said, checking her weapons. "We hold the line until the children are safe. Whatever comes up from that facility, we stop it here." Sergeant Vasquez was already setting up defensive positions. "Captain, our weapons might not be effective against energy beings." "Then we'll find a way to make them effective," Sarah replied. "Dr. Warren, you said these things feed on life force and emotion. What happens if we give them something indigestible?" Dr. Warren's eyes widened with understanding. "You want to feed them human stubbornness." "Exactly. These creatures have been isolated for millions of years, feeding on species that surrender when faced with certain death. They've never encountered anything like humans before." The ground beneath the sanctuary began to crack and heave. Beams of crystalline light shot up through the fractures, and something vast and terrible began to emerge from the depths. The ancient consciousness had taken a new form, a writhing mass of energy and malevolent intelligence that towered over the building. The entity's voice echoed across the courtyard, speaking directly to their minds. "We have waited so long for this feast. The empathic children will sustain us for centuries." Sarah stepped forward, her weapon raised. "Over my dead body." The creature's attention focused on her, and she felt the full weight of its alien intellect pressing against her mind. It tried to instill fear, to paralyze her with visions of death and destruction. Instead, Sarah smiled. "Is that supposed to scare me?" she asked conversationally. I've been fighting the Vexthai for 8 years. I've been shot, blown up, irradiated, and once nearly eaten by a space monster. You're going to have to do better than scary visions. The entity recoiled, confused by her response. It had never encountered a mind that processed terror as an inconvenience rather than a weakness. Her team spread out around her, their weapons trained on the creature. None of them looked particularly frightened. Concerned, yes, but not afraid. They had all volunteered for this mission, knowing it would probably kill them. "You know what your problem is?" Sarah continued, advancing on the creature. "You've been picking on children. You've gotten used to easy prey, but humans don't surrender just because the odds are bad. We get angry." The entity lashed out with tendrils of energy, trying to drain the life force from Sarah's team. But something unexpected happened. Instead of weakening them, the attack seemed to make them stronger. The humans absorbed the creature's assault and converted it into raw determination. Dr. Warren laughed, a sound equal parts terror and exhilaration. "Captain, I think I understand why the Vexthai requested our help specifically. We're not just immune to fear. We're psychologically incompatible with this creature's feeding mechanism." "Explain," Sarah said, not taking her eyes off the entity. "This thing feeds on despair. On the moment when prey accepts that death is inevitable," Dr. Warren shouted over the sound of energy discharges. "But humans don't have that moment. We keep fighting even when logic says we should surrender. We're literally indigestible to this creature." The ancient consciousness was becoming increasingly agitated. It had spent millions of years perfecting its ability to harvest life force from other species, but the humans were proving impossible to feed on. Worse, their refusal to submit was somehow disrupting its ability to affect other targets. Around the courtyard, Vexthai children who had been cowering in terror began to stand up. The humans' stubborn defiance was spreading, creating a field of resistance that the entity couldn't penetrate. "Impossible!" the creature hissed. "All beings fear death. All beings submit to inevitability." Sarah fired her weapon directly into the entity's core. The energy beam should have passed harmlessly through its incorporeal form, but somehow it struck solid matter. The creature shrieked in pain and surprise. "You made one mistake," Sarah said, advancing steadily. "You assumed that all species think like you do. But humans have a saying, there are things worth dying for." Her team opened fire in unison, their weapons somehow affecting the energy being. Each shot was powered not just by technology, but by pure human determination, the absolute refusal to let innocent children die while they still drew breath. The entity began to retreat, its form becoming less stable as it encountered resistance it had never experienced before. For the first time in millions of years, it faced prey that fought back not despite the certainty of death, but because of it. "We have consumed entire civilizations," it raged. "We have harvested the life force of billions. You cannot stop us." "Watch us," Sarah replied simply. The battle raged across the sanctuary's grounds as the ancient consciousness fought desperately to maintain its cohesion. But the humans' psychological assault was relentless. Every time it tried to instill despair, they responded with defiance. Every time it demonstrated their inevitable doom, they shrugged and kept fighting. Finally, something in the entity's collective mind snapped. It had been sustained for millions of years by the certainty that all beings would eventually surrender to despair. The humans' absolute refusal to accept defeat was unraveling the fundamental assumptions that held its consciousness together. With a final psychic scream, the ancient intelligence collapsed back into its crystalline forms. But instead of the pulsing, living crystals that had emerged from the research facility, only inert geological specimens remained. Sarah lowered her weapon, breathing hard. Around the courtyard, her team was checking for injuries and assessing the damage. The Vexthai children were emerging from their shelters, no longer afraid. War Master Kethvar approached slowly, his compound eyes wide with amazement. Captain Chen, how did you know your weapons would be effective against an energy being? Sarah smiled tiredly. I didn't, but humans have a tendency to keep trying things until something works. We're too stubborn to accept that something is impossible. Dr. Warren was examining the remains of the crystalline artifacts with her scanners. Captain, the psychic emanations have ceased completely. Whatever was trapped in these crystals, it's gone now. Good, Sarah said. Kethvar, I recommend having these remains destroyed completely, just to be safe. The Vextai commander nodded. It will be done. He paused, studying Sarah's team with something that might have been respect. Captain, I owe you an apology. When we first encountered humans, we assumed you were simply primitive and reckless. We did not understand that your refusal to surrender comes from strength, not ignorance. Sarah looked around the courtyard at the Vextai children who were now playing again, their laughter filling the air. War Master, our species have been fighting each other for 8 years. Maybe it's time we found a better way to coexist. Kethvar's mandibles clicked in agreement. Perhaps our children could teach us how to play together instead of fight. 3 days later, Sarah stood on the bridge of the Prometheus as it departed Kethmoran orbit. The mission had been a success. The children were safe, the threat had been eliminated, and preliminary peace negotiations had begun between humanity and the Vextai Dominion. But the real victory, Sarah realized, wasn't the defeat of an ancient enemy or the end of a war. It was the moment when two species that had seen each other as monsters began to see each other as parents, trying to protect their young. Captain, Lieutenant Kim reported, we're receiving a transmission from the Vextai High Command. Put it through, Sarah said. The holographic display showed War Master Kethvar, but he was not alone. Standing beside him was the young Vextai child who had approached Sarah during her first visit to the sanctuary. Captain Chen, Kethvar said, Jessica wanted to say goodbye to the humans who saved her friends. The child stepped forward and spoke in carefully practiced English. Thank you for protecting us. My father says humans are not afraid of anything. Is that true? Sarah smiled. We're afraid of lots of things, Jessica. We're just more afraid of letting bad things happen to good people. The child considered this seriously. When I grow up, I want to be brave like a human. When you grow up, Sarah replied, I think you'll find that being brave like a Vextai is more than enough. As the transmission ended and the Prometheus jumped to hyperspace, Sarah reflected on what her species had learned. They had discovered that the most dangerous species in the galaxy wasn't dangerous because it was evil, but because it was afraid. They had learned that sometimes the greatest courage came not from fighting enemies, but from protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Most importantly, they had proven that humans weren't just good at destroying things, they were good at saving them too. The galaxy was still a dangerous place, full of ancient threats and unknown enemies. But now it had something it had never had before. Two species that understood that some things were worth more than victory. Some things were worth everything.